Welcome. Scott here. Here is a quick boss guide for the upcoming event, Act 3 Chapter 8 Part 2 Infinite Possibilities. The event will feature the debut of a new character, Braska from Final Fantasy X, who will be making their debut. Joining Braska, the synergy unit for the event is Jet, Ignis, and Kain. Jet, Ignis, and Braska will be getting their force enhancement boards unlocked. Jet will also get his rework and C90 awakenings. We will be fighting Braska's final EN in 2 phases. The first phase has 5 million HP. The second phase has 50 million HP. Throughout the fight, the boss will be accompanied by 2 U Pagoda which has 10 million HP each. The turn requirement is 70. The HP requirements is a strict 3000. Before I continue further, here is a small disclaimer clause for the video. The guide is written based on the time that the event was released for the Japanese version. Please do note that it is possible that the boss fight mechanics might differ when the actual event is released in global. As we are no longer have Luvania Plus fights, the boss guide will be focused primarily on Shinryu fights. In Shinryu, you need to understand the effects gained by the boss as the force gauge build up, its force ability and its force time effect. As your party has low force levels at the start of the era, it is highly certain that the boss force gauge will build up faster than yours. To have a better understanding on the basics of the force gauge mechanics and Shinryu fights, I have done a video explaining the mechanics. I have included the link to the video under the comments and video description for your quick reference. For this fight, the boss force gauge is broken into 5 thresholds. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 40%, the boss gains additional brave resistance of 30% against non-fire elemental attacks. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 60%, the boss gains additional brave resistance of 30% against non-fire elemental attacks and inflicts HP poison field that scales off 10% of attacker's initial brave. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 80%, the boss gains additional brave resistance of 50% against non-fire elemental attacks and inflicts HP poison field that scales off 10% of attacker's initial brave. The boss force gauge will build up faster as its HP is lowered. You can refer to the table on the screen for the percentages. At the 100% threshold, the boss will use its force ability, Jet Bomber, and activates its force time for 5 turns. The boss force ability, Jet Bomber, is a guaranteed hit, reset break status, AoE Brave plus HP attack. It will also delays all targets turn by 1. Upon using the force ability, the boss will enter into its force time where the gauge will start to emit a red hue with counter of 5 on its gauge. When the force time is activated, the boss will heal 80% of the damage received with its strengthen aura. For example, if you deal 50k damage, the boss will heal 40k after receiving the damage. In other words, your damage dealt will be reduced to 20%. To freeze the enemy's force time, you need to use a fire elemental force ability, which is Braska's FR ability at the moment. You can also fire enchant Kain FR for the criteria. You need to use Lulu's LD to true enchant Kryle's FR to fulfill this condition. To make your fight easier, you can bring a fire enchanter like Ignis and Lulu. Like Pernello in the previous chapter, Ignis is a great FR charger. Do note that having fire enchant isn't a necessity as long as you have good party-wide damage mitigation. Now let's proceed with some party setup recommendations. Recommended calls abilities. To ensure that you are able to constantly break them, it is important to inflict defense down debuffs. Example of calls abilities that inflict defense down calls are Ferris, Titus, Jack, and Vanille. To speed up the fight, using HP damage up debuff calls like Karaseme, Seymour, Fran, Ignis, Lily-Set, Maria, and Dark Knight Cecil are useful. Although a bit trickier to use, Aura type HP damage up calls like Kamari, Alisai, Priyash, Leo and Locke are also viable. Most recently C90 units have Aura type HP damage up bonuses. You can use Dissidia DB Call Finder to find out more. The fight features a lot of HP attacks and a restrictive HP requirement of 3000. It is best to bring a burst healing call like Lena, Ram, Mog or Sidor. Lena, Mog and Sidor has debuff evasion and cleansing, which is an useful utility to handle against the boss jet beam triggers in phase 2. Next, I will be covering units that will be useful to handle the fight mechanics. For any endgame fights like Lufania and Shinryu, it is always recommended to bring supports for their aura and buffs. You can consider bringing Selphie, Lena, Ishtala, Yuna, Garnet, Purim, Ram, and Ramza. Both Selphie, Lena, and Yuna are great for this fight for their debuff evasion and cleansing utility as well. Selphie can make your party hit hard with her guaranteed launch debuff, while Lena can ensure your party is always safe with her powerful HP regen buffs. Bring a support that have strong HP regen and burst healing is important for this fight. The fight features a lot of guaranteed hit HP attacks, mainly from U-Pagoda, that are accompanying the main boss. So, avoid bring evasion units. Tanks and damage mitigators are great options heal to minimize the damage taken by your party. You can consider bringing one of the following options: Auron, Beatrix, Snow, Zack, Gladio, Warrior of Light, Celis, and Golov. Counter damage mitigators like Beatrix, Auron, Gladiolus, and Golov are great options for this fight, as the boss force gauge has properties that will limit your brave damage capabilities if they are dealing non-fire elemental attacks. To avoid getting hampered by the force gauge effects, you can bring one of the two fire enchanters in Lulu or Ignis. Ignis is great here as he offers great utility in the forms of debuff evasion other than fire enchant. He was also one of the best budget FR gauge chargers in the game. If you don't want to bring fire enchanter, you can bring fire elemental units like Jet, Vincent, Papalymo, Vaughn, or Vivi. The fight is designed to showcase the strengths of the featured FR unit in Braska. When Braska's force ability is activated, you can abuse his damage bonus by dealing any form of fire elemental attacks. Braska can massive uptick the force damage bonus by using his Kuraga ability. Braska himself is also another great force gauge charger that is worth the full force enhancement upgrades if you get his FR. In this era, units with their force enhancement will offer additional advantage for the fight, as they will gain bonuses from force time or when the force gauge is at least 80%. They will also gain bonuses to help the charging of your own force gauge, which means you can gain access to your force time earlier. If you still haven't pulled for any FR, you can gain access to the powerful force gauge by bringing Kain, Kryl, or Braska Friend. Kain FR with BT Friends is a premium luxury to have in early Shinryu and will continue to be one of the best friend support units for a while. You can build your force gauge to the max, bringing in your Kain FR Friend to activate the force gauge. Get into your own burst phase and abuse his powerful follow-up. Fulfilling his force conditions of dealing a full party launch or dealing ranged damage will enhance the damage bonuses during his force time. Kryl's FR is also great as she can offers a devastating nuke strategy alternative with her spamming her S1 with Kain follow-up attacks during her force time. Braska can also employ the similar form of strategy, but you will need to bring Fire Enchant Call on Kain to take advantage of that. To build up your force gauge, consider bring a force gauge charger. Pernello, Ignis, Kryl, and Braska offers good option for the fight. If you have their force level max, they can supercharge the force gauge fast and give you big damage bonuses boost. Instant turn ability or high turn rate ability that does not do HP damage is a premium utility for force gauge charging. Pernello can provide powerful HP regens and provide big burst healing with her EX. She can cleanse debuffs with her LD. Ignis and Braska will work wonders here with their other form of support utility like debuff evasion and burst healing. You can bring other units that has force enhancements unlocked for the fight. Kain, Strago, and Jet offers nice damage with C90. As mentioned earlier, the fight features a lot of AoE HP damage attacks. A damage mitigator like Warrior of Light and Auron will help a lot for the fight. Kais is great for his turn manipulation and guaranteed launches with his hero support buff. On the screen, you will see a timeline showing the HP thresholds triggers that you need to watch out for. There are 2 key phases for this fight. Like Lufania, Shinryu fights also features aura boosts for the boss when their HP are depleted to a certain threshold. For this fight, the aura triggers are the start of each phase. The enemy's force gauge will charge faster as their HP depletes. As the enemy's force gauge reaches 40% and above, the boss will gain additional resistance to non-fire attacks. It will apply a HP poison aura when its force gauge reaches 60% and above. When it activates its force time, the boss will heal back 80% of the damage received. For phase 1, you need to do the following before you can go to the next phase. 1. Defeat the U-Pagoda first. The main boss will gain absurd damage resistance auras that prevent you from dealing any damage to it until the pagodas are defeated. 2. Once the pagoda are defeated, you can finally do some damage to the main boss. It has 5 million HP in this phase. 3. As you are about to defeat it, it will trigger Jet Bomber Plus, which will cause it cleanse all the debuffs, and deal a guaranteed hit, Brave gain, AoE Brave plus HP attack that deletes your party's current turns. It will also gain a massive boost to its speed and turn rate. You can bypass this by killing off the boss while in your burst phase or summon mode. After the trigger, you will enter into phase 2, where the boss will use regenerate to restore its HP and raises its max HP to 50 million. It will resummon the pagoda. At the 89%, 29%, 19%, and 9% HP thresholds, it will use Jet Beam, which is a single target brave attack that dispel the left-handmost buff and inflict 1 turn petrify debuff. This attack will always target the lowest HP unit on the field. At the 49% HP threshold, it will trigger another Jet Bomber Plus. This time you cannot bypass the attack. If you trigger the threshold while in summon or burst phase, the boss will unleash the attack once you exit the phase. The U-Pagoda has mainly single target guaranteed hit HP attacks that delay target. Don't bother to focus on damaging them, as the main boss will revive both of them as you killed them. Overall, this is a simple mechanic fight. It won't be too difficult if you are bringing the right units for the fight. However, do keep in mind of the strict HP requirements and try to get the boss out of its force time when you are about to finish the fight. A hit and counter strategy with damage mitigation is highly recommended here. Now let's proceed with the boss mechanics proper. Similar to any Lufania fights, for Shinryu fights, the boss will also gain stats boosts and brave gain reduction auras when you deplete the boss's HP to a certain threshold. However, Shinryu bosses will also gain HP damage reduction auras as well. The threshold's trigger for this fight is at the start of the phases. At the start of the fight, it will boost its defense stats by 100%. It will raise its brave damage and brave gain reduction auras to 90%. It will also reduce your HP damage dealt by 400%. Generally, the boss is immortal until you defeat the 2 U-Pagoda. Defeat them will remove HP damage resistances. At start of the second phase, it will further boost its defense stats to 100% and the HP damage dealt reduction auras to 50%. The fight will still feature 90% brave damage and brave gain reduction auras. To handle the defense stats boost, you can inflict defense down calls. To handle the brave gain reductions, you can bring a brave gain up support like Agrias, Ram, or Quistis. With the recent units released, you shouldn't have any problem in handling the brave gain or damage reduction auras. For HP damage reduction auras, HP damage up calls will only partly offset against the reductions. However, you can easily overwrite them with your party force time. As we progress through the era, we will gain access to units with FR that allows you to build up your force time HP damage bonuses up to 999%. Learning on how to take full advantage of the damage window in Shinryu fight holds the key on how to make Shinryu fights easier. Now, I will be covering the boss key mechanics in detail. Firstly, let's focus on the first phase of the fight. After the boss activates the aura, you will see a message that states difficult to damage without defeating the U-Pagoda first. Destroy the 2 U-Pagoda. They have 10 million HP each. You will be dealing 0 HP damage to the main boss until the pagoda are defeated. Once the pagoda are destroyed, you can start damaging the main boss. At this phase the boss has 5 million HP. When its HP is at 1% to 2%, you will trigger Jet Bomber Plus. Upon the trigger, the boss will cleanses all the debuffs. It will follow up with a guaranteed hit, Brave Gain, AoE Brave plus HP attack that deletes your party's current turns. It will also gain massive boost to its speed and turn rate. A useful tip in handling this threshold is that you can bypass this by killing off the boss while in your burst phase or summon mode. After you have triggered Jet Bomber Plus and defeating the main boss, it will use Regenerate, where it will raise its max HP to 50 million and activates the damage boosting auras. It will follow up with resummoning the U-Pagodas back to the battlefield. This will mark the commencement of the real battle. Don't focus too much energy in defeating the pagoda, as the main boss will revive both of them once you defeat them. The boss will auto-revive them if you kill them off in the summon or burst phase. At the 49% HP threshold, the boss will trigger another Jet Bomber Plus. Unlike the previous trigger, you cannot bypass this. If you trigger the HP threshold while in your summon or burst phase, the boss will follow up with that move after you exited from the phase. Thus, prepare your damage mitigation when you are about to trigger the phase. In this slide, I will cover briefly on the key attacks that you need to watch out for during the fight. The boss will trigger Jet Beam at the 89%, 29%, 19%, and 9% HP threshold. Jet Beam is a single brave attack that will always target the lowest current HP unit on the battlefield. It will dispel one left-hand most buff and inflict one turn Petrify debuff. You can block the debuff with debuff evasion, but make sure it isn't on the left-hand most buff slot. You can manipulate the order of your buffs by refreshing it. You can also avoid this by setting Kain as the lowest HP and have him hide up in the air. If you bypass the trigger at all one go, the boss will do Jet Beam in succession. For example, if you reduce the boss HP from 30% to 9%, the boss will counter with Jet Beam 3 times. Other than Jet Bombers and Jet Beam, the main boss have very generic attacks. It will always use Triumphant Grasp every 2 to 3 turns. So, make sure you keep the boss locked to your tank or cover with a counter tank like Auron or Golov. Now let's focus a bit on the boss partners in crime. The U-Pagoda has 10 million HP each. They mainly use Osmose, a single target brave attack, and Curse, a single target guaranteed hit HP attack. When you are going towards to ending the fight, the pagoda will start incorporate the plus variant of the Curse. The difference between the two variant is the number of turn delays. Getting delayed 2 will make the fight harder, as the bosses will gain turns in succession, so off-turn damage or counter tanks will help a lot here. We have reached the last slide of the guide. As this is the second Shinryu fight, there is a high possibility that you might not access to the powerful force time mechanics if you didn't get any FR in Kain FR cycle. So, I will be covering on how to handle them if that happens. Let's start off with the easier scenario. In other words, you have gotten a FR weapon. You can just simply build up your force gauge. Every action taken will build up the gauge. The pace of the gauge build-up will depends a lot on your party force level. The higher the force level, the faster the gauge will charge. Unless your party force level is fully maxed, it is highly unlikely that the charging of your force gauge will be faster than the boss force gauge, so you will be bound to see the boss force mechanics. The strategy with FR is quite simple. Just build up your gauge. Once it is fully charged, use force ability to activate your party force time. Abuse force time mechanics by deploying units that help to fulfill force time conditions. 1. If your charger is at a high force level, you can abuse it with them spamming instant turn skills while Kain firing lancets at the bosses. 2 units that are featured in the banner, Braska and Ignis, are good FR charger options. 2, if you are using Kayn FR, you can gain big bonuses, if you score a full party launch. Units that can launch and delay will help a lot. One of the key conditions for Kayn FR is dealing ranged damage. Off-turn damage will also help to boost the damage bonus. Pairing units that deal off-turn like Sasnii, Freya, or Noctis will help to amplify the build-up of HP damage bonuses. Pair them with a turn hogger like Tidus and Terra, or you can use your FR charger like Kryle, Ignis, Braska, and Pernello to spam their non-attack instant turn to abuse the damage bonus. Now let's talk about the harder option. In other words, doing the fight without any FR. As the saying goes, if you don't have one, borrow one from your friend. If you have gotten Kayn, Braska, or Kryle fully geared, do a favor for the community by setting up them as your friend's support. The boss damage bonuses will be weakened if you deal fire elemental attack. Other than Ignis, the other fire enchanter option is Lulu. It is possible to do it without any fire elemental units for the fight, but it will be a bit harder for sure. AoE damage mitigation is important here as the fights feature a lot of constant HP attacks along with a strict 3000 HP requirement for the fight. The Pagoda have delays in their attack which could result the boss gaining lots of turns in succession. To counter against that, deploy off-turn damage like traps and counters will help to break the boss turns. Make use of Brave control utility debuffs like Poison or Sap debuff to minimize their Brave gains. Set up a non-debuff based damage mitigation call at 49% HP threshold of the second phase to tank against the incoming Jet Bomber Plus. Warrior of Light LDCA, 9LD, or Beatrix Holy Knight Safeguard are good options here. Instant Break and Gravity Brave Shaving utility will help a lot for the fight as well. You can solo the fight with Auron or do a duo run with him and Ignis, but that will take ages to complete. I have included the link to the run in the video description below. Here is a quick overview on the featured unit, Braska's FR. Braska is a hybrid FR charger and fire damage elemental unit. He can fast charge the gauge with spamming his Curaga and deals fire elemental damage with his EX and LD. However, he doesn't offer party fire enchant. You will need to bring a fire enchant call to abuse his force gauge, Lulu or Ignis LDCA. Braska's force time allows the party to gain an additional 20% damage bonus when the party unit is dealing a fire elemental damage. However, the bonuses don't apply to off-turn damage. If the unit's HP is maxed, they will also gain 15% additional damage bonus. In short, if the unit is deal fire damage with their HP fully maxed, they will gain 35% damage bonus on the turn. As Braska's Curaga is a non-HP damage skill and it is instant turn, he will boost the force gauge by a whopping 50% if you have his force enhancement boards fully maxed. Braska has 7 uses of Curaga. He can have more uses with free skill uses after using his EX. Braska can be used a force gauge charger and you swap him out for a friend unit to take advantage of that souped up force time. His FR has decent on-turn conditions which Braska himself can usually hit, however other units may need help via enchanting. Ignis can enchant non-elemental attackers while Lulu can enchant anyone. In HP poison or attack heavy fights, units with strong heals and regans can help ensure units are healthy enough to hit his full HP FR condition. With this, I have come to the end of my boss guide presentation. Hopefully you find it useful. If you like the video, please give a like. Please subscribe to my channel for future gaming content. Good luck for the fight in the coming days. Bye.